The last coffee stop. The snow had been falling since dawn, slow, thick flakes drifting like bits of silence through the pale Alaskan sky. Henry kept the old Ford F-150 steady on the long road that wound toward Nome. The heater hummed softly, Margaret's hands wrapped around a thermos of coffee, and Buddy's nose pressed against the frosted window, watching the white blur of the world pass by. "Not much traffic out here," Margaret said with a half smile. Henry chuckled. "Guess everyone's got more sense than us." "Or less coffee," she replied. They passed a faded road sign, Moose Creek Junction, 12 miles. A few miles later, they spotted a small wooden cafe glowing against the snow. The neon sign above the door flickered between coffee and open, its letters half buried in frost. Inside, the smell hit first: coffee, cinnamon, and something like baked apples. The bell over the door jingled softly as they stepped in. The place was warm, dimly lit, with a counter made of old timber and a handful of stools that had seen better days. A woman stood behind the counter, gray hair in a bun, flannel shirt, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "Well now," she said, smiling. "Didn't think I'd see new faces today. Coffee?" Henry nodded. "Two, if you've got enough to share." She poured the coffee slow, the way people do when they have time. Buddy settled near the wood stove, sighing deeply as the heat reached him. Margaret looked around. There were photographs on the walls, fishing boats, mountains, people smiling in heavy coats. In the corner, an old jukebox hummed faintly, playing a tune from another lifetime. "You run this place all by yourself?" Margaret asked. The woman smiled, glancing toward the empty stool beside her. "Not exactly. My husband built it. I just kept it going after he stopped showing up." Her voice wasn't sad, just quiet like the snow outside. Henry frowned gently. "He's passed?" She shook her head, a small laugh escaping. "No, he's out there somewhere. Coast Guard took him 40 years ago. Storm came, boat didn't." She pointed at the counter beside her. "Still pour him a cup every morning. Habit's a funny thing." Henry looked at the untouched mug, steam curling in the lamplight. "Guess he'd like that," he said softly. "Oh, I know he would," she smiled. "He always said I made the world's worst coffee. Maybe that's why he stayed out at sea." They all laughed, the kind of laugh that only exists between strangers sharing warmth in the middle of nowhere. Outside, snow thickened against the window. The light outside dimmed and time slowed, as it tends to in small places. The woman, her name was Elsie, refilled their mugs. "You two passing through?" "Yeah," Henry said. "Heading north. Not sure where, really." "That's a good way to travel," Elsie replied. "Not knowing means you might actually find something." She leaned her elbows on the counter. "You know, folks say Alaska's empty, but it's full of people who stayed after everyone else left. People who learned that the silence out here isn't lonely. It just talks quiet." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that's what we're looking for. Quiet that talks." Elsie grinned. "Then you're in the right state, honey." They stayed longer than they meant to. Another coffee, a slice of pie, stories about fishermen, caribou crossings, and how the northern lights sometimes dance low enough to touch the treetops. Henry found himself watching the snow outside, listening to the creak of the wood stove and the soft crackle of ice melting off their boots. When they finally stood to leave, Elsie poured one last refill and set 3 cups on the counter, one for Henry, one for Margaret, and one for the empty stool. "To good company," she said. Henry raised his cup. "To the ones who wait and the ones who keep the fire burning." They clinked gently. Outside, the world was white and hushed. Buddy jumped into the truck, tail wagging. Margaret wrapped her scarf tighter, smiling back at the cafe's window. Through the glass, she could see Elsie still standing there, one hand around her mug, the other resting on the empty stool beside her. As they drove off, the neon sign flickered again. Coffee. Open. Coffee. Until it disappeared in the snow. Henry looked at Margaret and said quietly, "Maybe that's what heaven smells like." She smiled. "Then I hope they serve refills." The road stretched ahead, endless and pale. And behind them, in a little cafe on the edge of nowhere, a second cup of coffee steamed patiently, waiting, as it always did, for someone who might never return. The trucker's tale. The next morning came pale and silent, the kind of dawn that looked more like a whispered promise than a sunrise. Henry brushed the frost off the windshield while Margaret packed the last of their things into the cab. Buddy sat in the front seat, nose fogging the glass as if he couldn't wait to hit the road. The Ford's engine growled to life, a deep, familiar sound against the endless hush of the Alaskan wilderness. They drove north again, the snow-covered pines standing tall like quiet sentinels, the horizon shifting between silver and pale gold. Miles rolled by without a word. That's the thing about long drives. Silence doesn't mean emptiness. Sometimes it means peace. Around midday, the snow eased and they spotted a rusted diner sign swaying in the wind. The Last Mile Cafe, truckers welcome. Henry grinned. Seems like we're the right kind of people. Margaret laughed softly. As long as the coffee's hot and the pie's real, I'll take it. They pulled in beside a long blue semi, the kind that looked like it had seen half the country and carried stories instead of cargo. Inside, the diner smelled of diesel, bacon, and fresh pancakes. A few truckers sat scattered along the counter, their jackets steaming as the snow melted off. The jukebox hummed an old Johnny Cash tune. Henry and Margaret took a booth near the window. Buddy curled up under the table, already dozing off. The waitress, a cheerful woman with a braid down her back, poured them coffee and smiled. "Y'all headed north?" "Seems like everyone is," Henry replied. She chuckled. "Only the ones who don't know better." A man sitting 2 stools away turned his head at that. Big shoulders, beard thick with gray, eyes that looked like they'd seen every road from Anchorage to the Yukon. He lifted his mug slightly. "Mind if I join you folks? Hard to eat alone when there's good company around." "Please," Margaret said. "We could use some stories to go with this pie." The man slid into the booth opposite them. His name was Cal Mason, though everyone called him Big Cal. He'd been a trucker for 35 years, hauling timber, supplies, and once a cage full of chickens that escaped somewhere near Fairbanks. Between bites of pancakes, Cal talked like the road was a living thing, something that breathed and watched. "You ever notice how the highway changes its mind out here?" he said. "One minute she's smooth and friendly, the next she's ice and ghosts." Henry smiled. "Ghosts, huh? We've met a few strange things ourselves." Cal nodded knowingly. "Alaska's full of them. Folks think it's the cold that keeps people away, but it's really the stories." He leaned closer. "There's a stretch between Tok and Delta Junction where the road runs straight for miles. No turns, no signs, nothing. They call it the White Ribbon. Every now and then, where truckers swear they see someone walking along it. Always the same. A man in a parka, carrying a lantern. No footprints behind him. Just light moving through the snow." Margaret shivered slightly. "And what happens if you stop?" Cal smiled faintly. "You don't. No one ever does twice." The waitress refilled their mugs. The diner lights flickered as the wind howled outside, and for a moment the 3 of them sat in a quiet that felt older than the walls. Cal looked at Henry and said softly, "People think driving up here is about getting somewhere. It's not. It's about who you are when you can't turn around. The road don't test your car. It tests your soul." Henry nodded slowly, staring into his coffee. "I guess that's true for a lot of things," he said. Cal smiled. "You'll see. The North doesn't give answers. It gives echoes. What you send out, you get back." They finished their meal, talking about little things. Fishing, snow chains, the time Cal rescued a moose calf stuck in a ditch. He told it all with the easy humor of a man who's made peace with solitude. When it was time to go, Cal stood, buttoning his jacket. "If you folks ever get caught on a bad road," he said, "don't fight it. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop, wait, and listen. The land talks. You just got to be quiet enough to hear it." He paid his bill, tipped the waitress more than his meal was worth, and walked out into the snow. Through the window, Henry and Margaret watched his taillights fade into the white distance, 2 red dots swallowed by the storm. Margaret exhaled softly. "He's one of those people who belong here, isn't he?" Henry nodded. "Yeah, like the mountains or the wind." Buddy stretched under the table, yawning as if agreeing. They sat for a while longer, sipping what was left of their coffee. Outside, the storm began again. Fine snow blowing across the road like whispers on the wind. When they finally stepped out into the cold, the Ford's windows were frosted over, the world muffled in white. As Henry brushed the windshield clean, he saw something drawn in the frost, just 3 simple words written with a fingertip. "Keep listening, CM." Henry smiled faintly. "Guess the road's already talking back." Margaret slipped her arm around his. Then we'd better not miss what it's saying. The truck rolled back onto the highway, tires crunching on snow, coffee still warm between them. The sky hung low and gray, but somewhere far ahead, a break in the clouds let through a soft streak of gold. It wasn't sunrise, not yet, but it was something close, and that was enough.